Episode 696. Book Talk begins at 25 minutes and 15 seconds. Cranford begins with episode 649. Welcome to CraftLit, the podcast for crafters who love books. My name is Heather Ordover, and I'm podcasting from where the Delaware River meets the Old York Road, New Hope, Pennsylvania. Episode 696. Oh, Hank. This episode of CraftLit is brought to you by our lovely patrons at patreon.com/craftlit, our premium members at craftlit.com/premium, and our channel members on YouTube. This week, we would like to thank Jennifer L., Sarah Blake, Kathy Sharp, Gorlitza, and Lisa B. Thank you so much for your support. We could not do this without you. Thank you. Well, hello. How are you? I'm pretty good today. I had a really good weekend. Well, I had a really good Saturday. An anonymous listener wrote to me several months ago and said, hey, there is this exhibit at the J.P. Morgan Library in New York City, and it is celebrating the 250th anniversary of Jane Austen's, what are we at? Birth, death. And would you like to go? I'd be happy to pay. And it wasn't sending me to New York City to see this exhibit. It was a round table online, 3 weeks. Every week there was another class. You know, it was a talking head with the PowerPoint, a woman who works with the curators at the Morgan Library who worked with them to bring this together. She's lovely. And so that was great. And I'm so excited that she was so persistent. She asked to be credited as an anonymous listener, which I think is very sweet. But she had to pursue me because it went to my spam folder. It had the live link in it. The email did originally. And yeah, that just went someplace where I couldn't find it. And I have so much trouble with email these days anyway, just brain-wise, that I was lucky that she went after me and got a hold of me eventually. And boy, the 3-week class was very interesting. I didn't learn, big revelatory things that I didn't know before because, we've done so much Jane Austen and I've done so much research on her on my own. But I got to see more supporting information, like primary source document supporting information on some things that I suspected and some things that we've come across, but I'd never really seen the background, the reason why we knew a certain thing. So that was really fun. Then I found out that the thing was closing September 14th, 2025, this last Sunday. And so I said to Andrew, God, this is a really hectic couple of months. The end of August, September, October, that's always a lot. Even when you don't have kids, it turns out it's still a lot. But so, any way that we could go up on, like, you get off work early and we go on a Friday or on a weekend. And so he treated me to go see the exhibit on Saturday. We took the train up, so it was relaxing. I could sleep on the way up. I could sleep on the way back. I was sitting the whole time, stress-free because we're not driving. And then we got up there. The Morgan Library is beautiful, but this is one of their special exhibits, so it's off on the side. And Andrew could not believe how many people were already in line. These are timed tickets. Now, it was pretty clear to me that while they are timed tickets, they had to pack a lot of people into each time slot to make this work, especially for that last weekend. So even though we got there exactly on time for our timed tickets, the line was the place was packed already. The line was out the door. It was down almost to the next exhibit entryway. And and it was very interesting because there were way more men there than I had anticipated. So, dudes, represent. Yes, this was great. It was so nice to see. But it was really, really awesome to see the age range because it went from high school students who were there with parents or older friends, like college age friends it looked like, or older siblings, all the way to people with walkers and in wheelchairs who were not me in a wheelchair with long COVID, but somebody who has no longer the ability to mobilize themselves around an exhibit on their own without an assistive device. It was so cool. And eavesdropping on the conversations was also a lot of fun. There were people who truly knew nothing about Jane Austen except that they'd read Pride and Prejudice in high school. And I think when they left, they had a much broader awareness of and appreciation for life back then. This exhibit wasn't like, oh, pretty Jane Austen stuff. It was documentation. It was the first time that any library had managed to pull together so many documentary texts that either Jane Austen touched, had been touched by Jane Austen tangentially, like somebody in her family, letters between her and Cassandra, letters between her and Fanny, her niece, letters between the siblings, the brothers in Cassandra after Jane had died. All of the first editions that were published in the United States in Philadelphia, they had one of each because there was a specific woman in the United States who collected these things. I will tell you very quickly 2 stories about that woman. She lived in Baltimore. She clearly had money. She just bought everything she could get her hands on that had Jane Austen anything to do with it. So she was buying stuff up, which means she would go to England to auctions and buy things as well. And apparently, and I think this was in the 50s, maybe the 60s, she was at one of these auctions and a British gentleman stood up. It may have been her ring, which is the Kelly Clarkson story, the tangential story. It was something physical and important, and it may have been the only piece of jewelry that we have of hers, which I have a photograph of. Anyway, she was at auction. She bought it. And a man stood up in the audience at the auction and said, I am sick of these rich Americans showing up and buying our heritage and then taking it over across the pond, and we never see it again. These are things that belong in England, and darn it, I'm ticked off. Which, of course, huge irony. Elgin marbles aside, there's that side of the story, which I found kind of awesome because it's like, yes, that's what it feels like. So return things, please. So she was miffed, and she stood up and she said, I am that American, and I am donating this to, I think she donated it back to the British Museum so that they could have it on display. So he shut up, but that was the only time she did that. So she got shamed into leaving stuff there. But because of that, she had this massive collection of textual items from Jane Austen. A lot of that showed up in this exhibit, along with things from everywhere. So you could think, oh, well, I'm looking at this exhibit, but I have to go through fast because there's so many people, and it's okay. I'll be able to buy a book at the end of the exhibit that shows, the things that I just looked at with documentation on it. And the answer was no, you won't be able to do that because this required the input, the physical input from so many different sources, many of them also museums, that they couldn't actually get the rights to make a book to publish all the things that they had pictures of. So you could take pictures in the exhibit and you could, as long as you didn't have a flash, you could take pictures of everything in the exhibit. And then I did. once I realized that we were going to get shoved through pretty quickly, I started taking pictures of everything. So the very beginning of the exhibit, I did not. But after, I don't know, the first 3 or 4 items that we were looking at, I was like, oh, I'm snapping as much of these as I can. Some of the pictures are great. Some of them are going to be marginal. We are putting them together in kind of a slideshow, and I will narrate as it goes. But I was going to tell you another story about that ring. So Kelly Clarkson recently, in the last 20 years, bought that at auction, the same ring, and did bring it back, and I think wore it to some event. And the furor over her taking that ring out of the country was pretty big at the time, understandably. She, Jane Austen lover, was like, this is nothing but respect. I don't want to damage our relationship with Jane Austen lovers around the world. So she and I think the Jane Austen Center worked out a donation situation. She may have, I'll have to check. I'll put it in the show notes. She either donated the ring back, so it was a tax write-off for her, or they have some arrangement that she can come and get it if she wants to wear it to something. Otherwise, it's going to be on display. Either way, they had the ring at this exhibit. It's beautiful. It's delicate and beautiful. Jane Austen apparently was between 5'6" and 5'8". I'm 5'8". You could not have fit me into her pelisse, which was there physically in person. And I mean, you might be able to get my arm in the sleeve, just my arm. I have fairly skinny arms. For me, my rib cage is big. I do not have much of a rib cage to waist separation. I'm short-waisted with a big rib cage, so I don't have a tiny waist, but my arms and wrists are small. I could have gotten my arm in the sleeve, and it was very clear to me that the sleeve was long enough to be, as a 5'8" person, covering my arm. Had I tried to wrap the pelisse around me and it was a full closure in the front, I might have gotten it around to the front of me. But really, like the back of the pelisse, the diamond panel that's the back of those Spencer jacket style clothes, probably would have covered shoulder blade to shoulder blade on me. She's tiny. I have no idea what her actual waist measurement must have been, but she was not a robust human. She may have been tall, but she was not like big, strong woman like Heather. So it was lovely. It was wonderful. I am, as I said, with the editors, Aldrin and I are going to be putting this together as kind of a slideshow. I'll putting this up on Patreon and as a channel membership thing on YouTube and as a member thing on the craftlit.com/premium webpage. And I have to do that because it seems to be the right thing to do. But also, I don't have rights to do any of this stuff. So I need to keep it as kind of a private thing behind a paywall. So I request that you don't download it and share it around. However, if you wanted to Zoom with friends to look at the stuff and share your Zoom window, that would be fine. So you can still share it with people. Just I'm asking you not to download it and send the file elsewhere because my name will be attached and I don't want to get sued, you know? I would rather share the information and not get sued. How's that? So that was lovely. Thank you, my lovely anonymous litter, for your persistence and for your generosity. What a treat that class was. And there were a couple of older women who were having trouble figuring out what the deal was with one particular coded letter that Jane had sent to her 8-year-old niece. And I showed them what the code was. And they're like, oh, how did you know that? And I said, well, I know about this because I have a podcast and we've done a lot of Jane Austen. And I did bring CraftLit postcards with me. So I handed those to them and I was following them several times and I was able to give them information on all of those, including that Prince Regent thing. Do you remember at the beginning of Emma, how she dedicated the book to the Prince Regent? Not because she liked the Prince Regent. She did not. But because the Prince Regent's personal secretary contacted her and said, the Prince Regent will accept your dedication in this upcoming book from you. Thank you. And so her intro page that is dedicated to him is like, this is dedicated to the Prince Regent. He is in charge of the country. Thank you. And that was it. In the exhibit and in the class, in both places, they're like, this was very special. She was requested to do this. She was very excited to do this. And I'm like, oh, no, she wasn't. And you can tell from the way it's written. She was just, if it had been boilerplate text that she could have just signed her name to, that would have been fine. So we had a good time. That said, Hank Green and John Green have been the vlog brothers on YouTube since YouTube started. And Hank has gone the science route, and John Green, you may remember The Fault in Their Stars and Turtles All the Way Down. And I think he did Alaska. He's done a lot of YA books. Excellent guys. There is no reason for them to be non-excellent people. But Hank Green messed up this last week. And I don't need to go into the details because you will be able to find all the details you want. He released a video that physicists still don't understand how knitting works or why knitting works. I think it was why, which I found suspect, as did a lot of people. As one woman put it, we caught Hank mansplaining knitting. And that is indeed what it comes off like. However, the thing that I think is really important about this video is so cool to have a nod from the science world that knitting is really cool and kind of miraculous. The first time you turn a heel on a sock, you're like, this is proof that God exists. This is incredible. I love this thing. Taking a two-dimensional flat piece of fabric and curving it into a cup form. That's just cool. There's nothing about that isn't cool. But Hank did the bad thing of making it sound like a bunch of dilettantes and nice little old ladies. He did not do the age thing. I'm adding that myself. But a nice group of little ladies sitting by the fireside, gradually and only by trial and error, which is, by the way, exactly what science is. So I don't know why that came off sounding disparaging, but only by trial and error figured out how to make these things. And then scientists showed up and figured it all out. And it's like, dude, who wrote this script? They claim that they have knitters on staff. That may be, but those knitters were not asked to do a final look on his video. And it's so disappointing. Worse, a lot of the people who've been criticizing it have said, we would love you to do this kind of video about knitting. Like, there are lots of really cool modern applications of knitting that are going on right now. More on that, please. But also, if you're going to go down this route and you're going to bring science into it, why aren't you talking about the punch card jacquard looms that started computing? Why not the actual thing? Why not the code knitters in the world wars? So don't watch his video. I have linked out to several of, I think, most useful from a teaching point of view, but also most useful from a catharsis point of view, a couple of the follow-up videos that really point out where he went off the rails and in some cases posit why. They do on the original video have a pinned comment right now from poor Jess, who is on staff and is apparently the knitter. I think it was kind of honestly tacky to send poor Jess out in public as the voice of this when in a situation where you have a host who is a name and a face, and their attitude, their vocal attitude was part of the problem. It seems a little disingenuous and misguided to send some poor girl who isn't even identified by job type. She could be, the girl who answers the phone on the weekends. I don't know. Send her out to the firing line. Seemed badly done. So anyway, that was really a kerfuffle. And it's, even if you aren't on YouTube, even if you aren't part of that world, even if you are a crocheter, not a knitter, crochet absolutely comes into play in commentary videos, because we've all had the thing happen where somebody is looking at you with two sticks and saying, oh, what are you crocheting? Or where you have one stick and people say, what are you knitting? Great teachable moments. That's fine. But this was rough. And it's also, I had this conversation with Erin this weekend. It's worth watching with younger people who can knit for a very specific reason. Erin pointed out that while his generation grew up with computers, they also grew up with enough of an analog world that they understand primary documents, physical documents, and they also understand a little bit more intuitively how the internet has been built. And as a consequence, they also know what its weak points are. And if you grew up considerably later than that, if you have a kid who's like 12, 13, 14 right now, chances are they don't actually know really what a search engine is, how it does, how it works, how it does what it does, how it works in the back end, what an algorithm actually is and does. And even if you don't know yourself, this video is a great one to use to say, he just said something as a flat out fact without documentation. If you have a kid who's a knitter or at least a crafter sitting there watching it with you, just pause it and say, do you have any questions about where he got this information or what his conclusion is about this? Because my guess is kids, even kids who are not knitters, crocheters, there are going to be some moments where he makes factual blanket statements. If they aren't picking up that that's a problem, they need to be alerted to the fact that when you hear somebody do this, it's a problem. So yeah, even if you aren't in the knitting world or on YouTube a lot, I still think this is a pretty useful video for teachable moments with young people, because it is a flawed video. Everybody has said they really hope that they do an update, and then they just sent poor Jess out to apologize. So I don't know what's going to happen. But I have links to that. And one of the girls also did a link to private equity predatory practices. This is what killed Joanne. This is what is killing the big four pattern making companies. Apparently, they're also going after yarn, independent yarn companies. Madeline Tosh has been bought up. Knit Picks has been bought up by the same company. There's a whole list, all owned by the same private equity group. This is dangerous because it creates a monopoly and reduces redundancy, which means the people who did the purchasing for one of those yarn lines, they'll wind up laying off all but one when they buy up these smaller companies. And then everything just becomes the same base and homogenized, and you're done. So I think I'm going to be spinning my own sock yarn for a while because I can't find the socks that rock base, that springy base that she used, and I'm just going to make my own. I'm very sad. But again, all those videos are linked to in the show notes. And please do watch at least one of those response videos to Hank Green. I think it's important. Our raffle book again this month, September 2025, is Andrew's new novel, Box of Night. We'll make it a signed copy so that we ship it to you, not the printing company. And yeah, I'm excited. It's a good book. It's timely. I sewed an AI pattern for a dress, and here's what happened. AI patterns, AI voices on YouTube, AI patterns, AI images on Pinterest and Etsy, AI everything on Etsy. If you don't know how to spot an AI photograph, Google it and you'll learn the tricks. It's very easy to spot. We do have a new raffle process, as I mentioned last episode. It's at the craftlit.com site, craftlit.com/raffle. And if you go there, we will just update that page every month with the next raffle, and there will be an entry slot at the bottom of that page for you to enter via. And we'll just do it the same way we did before. On the 30th or 31st of every month, at the end of that day, we will take all of the people who entered and randomly pick a winner. The plugin on the back end of the craftlit.com site actually randomizes the responses. So it's like a random number generator, and then it chooses who from that month is going to win. We'll contact you and then we'll send you stuff. And don't forget too, I didn't mention it last time, please send your own crafty videos. I know we've gotten some from people, and I know that I need to follow up with a couple of people about that. So, yeah, I'll do that. All right, so Mr. Harrison's Confessions. Let's talk book. So last week we got a little country mouse versus city mouse vibe going on, and the importance and the pressure of trying to make this profession that they are in, this medical profession, actually professional. How to keep people's belief in you as a professional alive, and that's going to be a tension all the way through that. For example, we're going to see the difference between medicine that was more or less apothecary based, a lot of herbal remedies and things like that people would have had access to, but you want to talk to a professional about the dosing on those things, because if we know just because it's a plant doesn't mean it can't kill you if you take too much of it. So that's kind of the older world that the other doctor is coming out of. And then Mr. Harrison, who is younger, newly educated in London at the particularly interesting hospital, Guy's Hospital, that we talked about last time. And he is going to have more knowledge about more new treatments, which will include stronger drugs and options like that, but also things that are replacing old practices. So things like bloodletting and amputation and things like that we look at and go, wow, that's ouch. That is something that even Dr. Harrison, Mr. Harrison, would look at as being kind of ouch and outdated and a little dangerous, knowing that the newer things are less invasive or less permanent in their application. So we're going to continue to see that. At the beginning of this particular episode, we hear a reference to Solomon's seal being in the garden area of a house as they walk in. And I knew it was a flower, but I didn't know exactly what it looked like. So I went and I found a picture of it online. And if you're watching YouTube, you will see it. And if you are listening on a podcatcher, you will be able to see the picture of this in the show notes. Beautiful. So beautiful. And yeah, I don't know if it looks like Solomon's seal, but it sure looks pretty. They're like little snowdrop flowers all hanging off of a long stem that has big hosta-like leaves. Very, very pretty. So it is definitely something that if I were walking into a house and noticed it, I would feel like I was in a very lovely, special, calm, quiet place that valued beauty and tranquility. It's a good thing, I think, for the location that we see it in. There's going to be a reference to Dutch tiles, a fireplace that's been decorated with Dutch tiles. I think I've mentioned there are places we go here that are ye olde, and they have Dutch tiles in the fireplaces as well. That's because most of those places were built in the 1700s. Dutch tiles, both Delft tiles that are the blue-white ones, but also the red and white ones, they were very popular in the late 1700s. They had a resurgence during the arts and crafts movement in the late 1800s, but at this time, as in Cranford, they've gone out of style. So Elizabeth Gaskell telling us that they are there in this location indicates to us that this building was built back a ways, but also not fashionable. It has not caught up with the times. It has not been kept up with the times as the times have moved along. So that's another little nod to Elizabeth Gaskell, thanking her for giving us a heads up on what was hip back then. It's kind of cool. There's a reference to Jargonelle pears. If you are interested in the fruit growing world, or if you live in England, I'm sure you know what Jargonelle pears are. I did not. The only pears I ever see in the store are Bosc pears, which always ship out very hard and firm. Jargonelle pears are a very old, long-lived, very hardy tree, variety of tree. They first get mentioned in text in the 17th century. They are the pears. If you see like Flemish still lives paintings, and there are pears there are these pears that look luscious. They have the green, like around the top where the stem is, and maybe around the base, you'll see green, maybe a little yellow, but it goes into this beautiful blush, like a girl's blush color. And they're gorgeous. Gorgeous, apparently, very sweet, very, like if one is ripe and you go to smell it, smelling it will be like tasting it. It will be an experience. It's very yummy. A late summer time, so we've just probably passed the time for Jargonelle pears, and it doesn't store well. So either you have to cook tarts with that pear right away as soon as you take it off the tree, or you have to eat it right away as you take it off the tree. But juicy, sweet, my mouth is watering. I have a picture of one. It's beautiful. You're going to hear Sir Astley Cooper and Sir Robert Peel get mentioned again. Peel was the prime minister, and Sir Astley Cooper was the big medical mucky muck at the time. Duncombe, don't forget, Duncombe, Duncombe. Duncombe is the name of the town that is the stand-in for Cranford, which is also the stand-in for Knutsford, where Elizabeth Gaskell actually truly grew up. Very, very similar town. I did find a picture. I can't find it again, but I did find a picture of Elizabeth Gaskell's hometown, Knutsford's main drag. And the only thing you need to know is that the set for Cranford that they used with the Judi Dench version miniseries, that's what it looks like. They did a great job. It was marvelous. You are going to hear a description of how Mr. Morgan orients Mr. Harrison's library or consulting room. Just pay attention when you hear that. It's just perfect. Elizabeth Gaskell, mwah. Her humor in this is subtle, but very much like Cranford's, where it's like, no, and that is supposed to be funny. Yes, that was a joke. And you're welcome. She's giving you a lot of gifts all the way through this story. It'll get tense, like stories do. You know, there will be drama, but a lot of fun too. There's a line saying, oh, this woman was in deep widow's mourning, such veils and fails and crapes and cloaks that she looked like a black crip haycock. Okay, that's a lot. We know what veils are, correct? Fails, probably Failles. No, Faieles. French, trailing things. So a veil trailing over the face. A fail would be like trailing off your back, like a long shawl that is draped mournfully about a person in mourning. Capes, we got cloaks, we got black crepe. CRAPE is the thick, black, textured, non-shiny, non-showy fabric that women often had to wear when they were in mourning. And this is still a time when there is high mourning, there's low mourning, there's all sorts of requirements of and during the mourning period that women were bound to. Men to a lesser point, although they might continue to wear a black armband as they went through the mourning period. But since they had to be out and in society as people working more, they had more dispensations, not surprisingly, for how they went through the mourning process. But she looked like a black crepe haycock. I was like, I wonder if haycock is what I think it is. And the answer is yes. It's in the United States, it would be a haystack. So she just looked like a lump of black crepe. The end. That's how much mourning she was displaying on her person. There is the usage of a word that I don't actually think we've talked about this before on the podcast. He will say that she uses a term that was very mal apropos, MAL-APROPOS, apropos, French, mal, bad, apropos, appropriate. The thing that I love about mal apropos as a term descriptive term is that the reason that this word has always stuck in my mind is because Richard Brinsley Sheridan wrote a play in 1775 called The Rivals. This is not the same plot as the Rivals show that David Tennant has been in. This is, I mean, it's not, but it is not that. But the Rivals that David Tennant is in, I think, knows its roots in Sheridan's play. He did School for Scandal. He did The Rivals. He wrote very, very funny plays. That's what he did. He was like pre-Oscar Wilde, very clever. And if you listen to a clip from a character in The Rivals, you will hear Oscar Wilde's drumbeat on the horizon, because in The Importance of Being Earnest, there is a character who jokes this way. Mrs. Malaprop is the name of the character that got so famous, and her misuse of words is legendary. I will link out to a scene that is done pretty well, actually, from a regional theater. I think it's the Seattle Shakespeare Company. Okay, so she instructs her niece, this is Mrs. Malaprop, instructs her niece, Lydia Languish, on the importance of controlling her passions, famously advising her to begin matrimony with a little aversion, and later attempts to describe Lydia's headstrong nature by calling her as headstrong as an allegory on the banks of the Nile instead of an alligator. And it just goes on and on. And then she tells Lydia that she must forget the young man. But I say it is, miss. There is nothing on earth so easy as to forget if a person chooses to set about it. I'm sure I have as much forgot your poor dear uncle as if he had never existed. That was not so much a malapropism as it is just lovely logic. It's easy to forget if you just remember to forget. And I'm sure I forgot your uncle, who I am right now mentioning, as though he had never existed, which I am proving he did, and that I am speaking nonsense because clearly I remember him. So there is going to be some Mrs. Malaprop humor by using malapropisms, malapropos speech from Mrs. Rose. And that will be one of her humorous traits as we continue through this story. Today's verbal tics in this regard are a little bit more heavy-handed than they will be throughout. But yeah, it's still Mrs. Gaskell doing genteel comedy. So before we get too far into it, I do want to mention something that was said on the comments on YouTube, which is you do not need to have listened to Cranford to listen to Mr. Harrison's confessions. So we're going to make that clearer in our titles and documentation and things like that. But this story does not hinge on Cranford. So if you're new and you missed it and you think, oh gosh, now I have to go back and listen to Cranford first, you actually don't. And I know it's kind of lame for me to be saying that now since we're into the second episode of Mr. Harrison, but I did want to make sure that that was clear in case somebody was feeling, oh gosh, maybe I should have gone and done that. I will certainly be mentioning Cranford things, but there is nothing in Cranford that if you didn't hear it, it's going to screw you up for this book. So be calm, all is well. All right, so let's listen to today, Chapter 3 and 4 of Mr. Harrison's Confessions by Elizabeth Gaskell, read for us by Noel Badrian. I do not think you can find this anywhere else, so I'm not going to tell you where to fast wind to because I don't think it'll matter. Let me know if I'm wrong on that, and let me know what you think about this story. 206-350-1642. And yeah, here we go. Chapters 3 and 4 of Mr. Harrison's Confessions.
Section 2 of Mr. Harrison's Confessions by Elizabeth Gaskell. Chapter 3. The vicarage was on the north side of the street, at the end opening towards the hills. It was a long, low house, receding behind its neighbours. A court was between the door and the street, with a flag walk and an old stone cistern on the right-hand side of the door, Solomon's seal growing under the windows. Someone was watching from behind the window curtain, for the door opened as if by magic as soon as we reached it, and we entered a low room which served as hall and was matted all over, with deep old-fashioned window-seats and Dutch tiles in the fireplace. Altogether it was very cool and refreshing after the hot sun in the white and red street. "Bessie is not so well, Mr. Morgan," said the sweet little girl of 11 or so, who had opened the door. "Sophy wanted to send for you, but papa said he was sure you would come soon this morning, and we were to remember that there were other sick people wanting you." "Here's Mr. Morgan, Sophy," said she, opening the door into an inner room, to which we descended a step, as I remember well, for I was nearly falling down it, I was so caught by the picture within. It was like a picture, at least seen through the door-frame. A sort of mixture of crimson and sea-green in the room, and a sunny garden beyond, a very low casement window open to the amber air, clusters of white roses peeping in, and Sophy sitting on a cushion on the ground, the light coming from above on her head, and a little sturdy round-eyed brother kneeling by her, to whom she was teaching the alphabet. It was a mighty relief to him when we came in, as I could see, and I am much mistaken if he was easily caught again to say his lesson when he was once sent off to find papa. Sophy rose quietly, and of course we were just introduced, and that was all before she took Mr. Morgan upstairs to see her sick servant. I was left to myself in the room. It looked so like a home that it at once made me know the full charm of the word. There were books and work about, and tokens of employment. There was a child's plaything on the floor, and against the sea-green walls there hung a likeness or two done in water-colours. One, I was sure, was that of Sophy's mother. The chairs and sofa were covered with a chintz, the same as the curtains, a little pretty red rose on a white ground. I don't know where the crimson came from, but I am sure there was crimson somewhere, perhaps in the carpet. There was a glass door besides the window, and you went up a step into the garden. This was first a grass plot just under the windows, and beyond that straight gravel walks, with box borders and narrow flower beds on each side, most brilliant and gay at the end of August, as it was then. And behind the flower borders were fruit trees trained over woodwork, so as to shut out the beds of kitchen garden within. While I was looking round, a gentleman came in, who I was sure was the vicar. It was rather awkward, for I had to account for my presence there. "I came with Mr. Morgan. My name is Harrison," said I, bowing. I could see he was not much enlightened by this explanation, but we sat down and talked about the time of year, or some such matter, till Sophy and Mr. Morgan came back. Then I saw Mr. Morgan to advantage. With a man whom he respected as he did the vicar, he lost the prim artificial manner he had in general, and was calm and dignified, but not so dignified as the vicar. I never saw any one like him. He was very quiet and reserved, almost absent at times. His personal appearance was not striking, but he was altogether a man you would talk to with your hat off whenever you met him. It was his character that produced this effect, character that he never thought about, but that appeared in every word and look and motion. "Sophy," said he, "Mr. Morgan looks very warm. Could you not gather a few Jargonelle pears off the south wall? I fancy there are some ripe there." Our Jargonelle pears are remarkably early this year." Sophie went into the sunny garden, and I saw her take a rake and tilt at the pears, which were above her reach, apparently. The parlour had become chilly. I found out afterwards it had a flag floor, which accounts for its coldness, and I thought I should like to go into the warm sun. I said I would go and help the young lady, and without waiting for an answer I went into the warm scented garden, where the bees were rifling the flowers and making a continual busy sound. I think Sophie had begun to despair of getting the fruit, and was glad of my assistance. I thought I was very senseless to have knocked them down so soon, when I found we were to go in as soon as they were gathered. I should have liked to have walked round the garden, but Sophie walked straight off with the pears, and I could do nothing but follow her. She took up her needlework while we ate them. They were very soon finished, and when the vicar had ended his conversation with Mr. Morgan about some poor people, we rose up to come away. I was thankful that Mr. Morgan had said so little about me. I could not have endured that he should have introduced Sir Astley Cooper or Sir Robert Peel at the vicarage, nor yet could I have brooked much mention of my great opportunities for acquiring a thorough knowledge of my profession, which I had heard him describe to Miss Tomkinson, while her sister was talking to me. Luckily, however, he spared me all this at the vicar's. When we left, it was time to mount our horses and go to the country rounds, and I was glad of it. Chapter 4. By and by, the inhabitants of Duncombe began to have parties in my honour. Mr. Morgan told me it was on my account, or I don't think I should have found it out. But he was pleased at every fresh invitation, and rubbed his hands, and chuckled as if it was a compliment to himself, as in truth it was. Meanwhile, the arrangement with Mrs. Rose had been brought to a conclusion. She was to bring her furniture and place it in a house of which I was to pay the rent. She was to be the mistress, and in return she was not to pay anything for her board. Mr. Morgan took the house, and delighted in advising and settling all my affairs. I was partly indolent and partly amused, and was altogether passive. The house he took for me was near his own. It had 2 sitting-rooms downstairs, opening into each other by folding doors, which were, however, kept shut in general. The back room was my consulting-room. The library he advised me to call it, and gave me a skull to put on the top of my bookcase, in which the medical books were all ranged on the conspicuous shelves, while Miss Austen, Dickens, and Thackeray were, by Mr. Morgan himself, skilfully placed in a careless way, upside down or with their backs turned to the wall. The front parlour was to be the dining-room, and the room above was furnished with Mrs. Rose's drawing-room chairs and table, though I found she preferred sitting downstairs in the dining-room close to the window, where, between every stitch, she could look up and see what was going on in the street. I felt rather queer to be the master of this house, filled with another person's furniture, before I had even seen the lady whose property it was. Presently she arrived. Mr. Morgan met her at the inn where the coach stopped, and accompanied her to my house. I could see them out of the drawing-room window, the little gentleman stepping daintily along, flourishing his cane, and evidently talking away. She was a little taller than he was, and in deep widow's mourning, such veils and falls and capes and cloaks, that she looked like a black crape haycock. When we were introduced, she put up her thick veil, and looked round and sighed. "Your appearance and circumstances, Mr. Harrison, remind me forcibly of the time when I was married to my dear husband, now at rest. He was then, like you, commencing practice as a surgeon. For 20 years I sympathised with him, and assisted him by every means in my power, even to making up pills when the young man was out. May we live together in harmony for an equal length of time. May the regard between us be equally sincere, although instead of being conjugal, it is to be maternal and filial. I am sure she had been concocting the speech in the coach, for she afterwards told me she was the only passenger. When she had ended, I felt as if I ought to have had a glass of wine in my hand to drink, after the manner of toasts, and yet I doubt I should have done it heartily, for I did not hope to live with her for 20 years. It had rather a dreary sound. However, I only bowed and kept my thoughts to myself. I asked Mr. Morgan, while Mrs. Rose was upstairs taking off her things, to stay to tea, to which he agreed, and kept rubbing his hands with satisfaction, saying, "A very fine woman, sir, very fine woman. And what a manner! How she will receive patients who may wish to leave a message during your absence. Such a flow of words, to be sure." Mr. Morgan could not stay long after tea, as there were 1 or 2 cases to be seen. I would willingly have gone, and had my hat on, indeed, for the purpose, when he said it would not be respectful, not the thing, to leave Mrs. Rose the first evening of her arrival. Tender deference to the sex, to a widow in the first months of her loneliness, requires this little consideration, my dear sir. I will leave that case at Miss Tomkinson's for you. You will perhaps call early to-morrow morning. Miss Tomkinson is rather particular, and is apt to speak plainly if she does not think herself properly attended to. I had often noticed that he shuffled off the visits to Miss Tomkinson's on me, and I suspect he was a little afraid of the lady. It was rather a long evening with Mrs. Rose. She had nothing to do, thinking it civil, I suppose, to stop in the parlour, and not go upstairs and unpack. I begged I might be no restraint upon her if she wished to do so, but rather to my disappointment she smiled in a measured, subdued way, and said it would be a pleasure to her to become better acquainted with me. She went upstairs once, and my heart misgave me when I saw her come down with a clean folded pocket-handkerchief. Oh, my prophetic soul! She was no sooner seated than she began to give me an account of her late husband's illness and symptoms and death. It was a very common case, but she evidently seemed to think it had been peculiar. She had just a smattering of medical knowledge, and used the technical terms so very mal à propos that I could hardly keep from smiling, but I would not have done it for the world. She was evidently in such deep and sincere distress. At last she said, "I have the diagnosis of my dear husband's complaint in my desk, Mr. Harrison, if you would like to draw up the case for the Lancet." I think he would have felt gratified, poor fellow, if he had been told such a compliment would be paid to his remains, and that his case would appear in those distinguished columns. It was rather awkward, for the case was of the very commonest, as I said before. However, I had not been even this short time in practice without having learnt a few of those noises which do not compromise one, and yet may bear a very significant construction if the listener chooses to exert a little imagination. Before the end of the evening we were such friends that she brought me down the late Mr. Rose's picture to look at. She told me she could not bear, herself, to gaze upon the beloved features, but that if I would look upon the miniature, she would avert her face. I offered to take it into my own hands, but she seemed wounded at the proposal, and said she never, never could trust such a treasure out of her own possession. So she turned her head very much over her left shoulder, while I examined the likeness held by her extended right arm. The late Mr. Rose must have been rather a good-looking, jolly man, and the artist had given him such a broad smile and such a twinkle about the eyes that it really was hard to help smiling back at him. However, I restrained myself. At first Mrs. Rose objected to accepting any of the invitations which were sent her to accompany me to the tea parties in the town. She was so good and simple that I was sure she had no other reason than the one which she alleged, the short time that had elapsed since her husband's death, or else, now that I had had some experience of the entertainments which she declined so pertinaciously, I might have suspected that she was glad of the excuse. I used sometimes to wish that I was a widow. I came home tired from a day's hard riding, and if I had but felt sure that Mr. Morgan would not come in, I should certainly have put on my slippers and my loose morning coat, and have indulged in a cigar in the garden. It seemed a cruel sacrifice to society to dress myself in tight boots and a stiff coat, and go to a 5 o'clock tea. But Mr. Morgan read me such lectures upon the necessity of cultivating the goodwill of the people among whom I was settled, and seemed so sorry and almost hurt when I once complained of the dullness of these parties, that I felt I could not be so selfish as to decline more than 1 out of 3. Mr. Morgan, if he found that I had an invitation for the evening, would often take the longer round and the more distant visits. I suspected him at first of the design, which I confess I often entertained, of shirking the parties. But I soon found out he was really making a sacrifice of his inclinations for what he considered to be my advantage. End of section 2.
All right, so we have learned a little bit more about everyone, about Mr. Harrison, about Mr. Morgan, and now we have Mrs. Rose. I love Mrs. Rose. I love the actress who played her in the Cranford miniseries. She was the one who was also in Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. Lovely. Oh my gosh, if you need a feel-good movie and you never saw it, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris will just float your boat. I showed it to the kids. I made the kids watch it with me. These are my adult lads, and I forced them to watch it with me, and they loved it too. It's just lovely, and the clothes are fabulous. So I love her. She's just anything she does, she's good. And oh my goodness, did she play? She didn't play the mom in North and South, did she? No, she couldn't have. Holy cow, now I've got to look that up. I'll put it in the show notes. And if you're watching YouTube, we'll have something on the screen saying, yes, it was her, or no, it wasn't. But either way, she's marvelous. I cannot remember her name right now. I am going to also fix that in the show notes and on screen as well. I loved also that when Mr. Morgan and Mr. Harrison walk into the vicarage, Sophie is sitting on the floor. Second time. Twice in Gaskell, and then also at the beginning of Little Women. But here, Sophie is sitting on the floor on a cushion. So she's perhaps a little more genteel in that respect. I also loved the comment that one way to define somebody as being a comfortable person to be around is you would talk with your hat off whenever you met him, which is both the sign of respect, like doffing your cap, but also that this is somebody who you can talk to for a while, which is not a bad thing for a vicar. I loved Mr. Harrison's line, again, Mrs. Gaskell doing her fabulous humor stuff, that when Mrs. Rose said that she expected that their relationship, hers as the housekeeper and Mr. Harrison as the doctor in the house, that their relationship, instead of being conjugal, would be maternal and filial, which is kind of, wow, okay, that's a lot. Thanks for making it a little awkward there. But then he says, I am sure she had been concocting this speech in the coach, for afterwards, for she afterwards told me that she was the only passenger. When she had ended, I felt as if I ought to have had a glass of wine in my hand to drink after the manner of toasts. It's like, well done. Hear, hear. Be upstanding for Mrs. Rose, who just finished her monologue that she prepared for Mr. Harrison. I love that. I also love that Mr. Morgan used the same phrase that we saw in Emma, that I get such a kick out of, it is not the thing. That is not done. We don't do that here, sweetie. I also loved that Mr. Harrison's commentary on why Mr. Morgan kept giving him the Tomlinson's house calls to do. I suspect he was a little afraid of the lady. I think so too. It just made me laugh. So good. So good. Such a sweet, sweet, sweet little story. All right, we're going to do 2 more chapters next week. Don't forget, send crafty videos if you would like us to show the fabulous things that you are doing while you are listening to the book audio over on the YouTube channel. Also, don't forget, this is September, which means the end of this month is Movie Watch Party. This is for patrons who are at that tier. The movie is going to be The Last Unicorn, which is an animated, I think it's pre-Ghibli, post The Hobbit, animated movie version of the book The Last Unicorn. The book The Last Unicorn, we had a very interesting conversation about. It is not a perfect book, I don't think, by any stretch, but it is one of those books that has things that stick with you. And in fact, while most of us said that we didn't like the book, every time I read one of the quotes that I had written down for whatever reason, our responses, our collective responses to those quotes were always positive. So it's like there's genius lines all over this book. And the plot is interesting. It is not a YA trope, the way that YA books are being written now, kind of the way that Howl's Moving Castle, and just like Diana Wynne Jones' books, who wrote Howl's Moving Castle, her books do not follow standard modern YA trope structures or even standard plot devices. There's just nothing really predictable about how their books are going to go. His book is like that. The movie's going to be interesting because the movie has different issues. So that's our movie watch party. We are going to do an open movie night. We did Jaws for our first open movie night. I think we're going to do that the second Thursday of the month at 8:00 Eastern. This next one will be October 9th. I think that's correct. And that will be Jurassic Park. For November, I want to do another open movie night. And it's the one that I've been threatening to do for a while since I finally figured out how I can do this. And these are all going to be held on the Discord servers. So if you need help getting onto that, let us know. Heather@craftlit.com, 206-350-1642, or post in the Facebook group. Somebody will be able to help you, whether it's me or somebody else. It's not that hard. Discord is remarkably like a America Online chat room or Prodigy or CompuServe. So if you are older than 30 and haven't gotten on Discord before, don't be intimidated. Once you get the thing signed up and loaded up on your machine, it's really not that difficult. And it's very good about notifications, which I like in particular. It has made life a lot easier. But that November movie watch party, the open watch party for anybody who wants to come, will be Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. We've read The Thin Man this year and watched The Thin Man movie, 2 of my favorites. And if you like noir thrillers, if you like Old Humphrey Bogart, Cagney, Alan Ladd, any of those kinds of movies that in the 30s and 40s especially were costumed by Edith Head, an extraordinary costumer. Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, although all-out comedy, was costumed by her. she had costumed all of the original pictures that they take clips from. So she was able to match the costumes perfectly so they could put Steve Martin intercut into scenes with all of these old actors. And it is seamless. They rebuilt sets that they show, I think was it Alan Ladd? It's Alan Ladd or Burt Lancaster coming down a hallway and going into a hotel room. And Steve Martin comes down the same hallway and goes into the same hotel room. They had to rebuild it and get the camera angle exactly right and get the numbers on the door perfect. And they did. So that'll be our December Thursday night open watch party. And so October 9th for Jurassic Park, November 13th for Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. And then if I can get a copy of it, and I am having trouble with this one, if I can get a copy of it, December 11th, we will do Preston Sturgis's Sullivan's Travels. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. That's a Preston Sturgis. If you aren't familiar with him, all I'm going to say is screwball comedy with a big old heart. He is an interesting director who I didn't know anything about. I had not watched any of his films that I can remember before I married Andrew. So huge thanks to Andrew for Preston Sturgis coming into my life. All right, that is it. You take care of yourselves. Have a great week. I will talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye. You can find show notes for this episode and links to other episodes at CraftLit.com. CraftLit also appears anywhere you can get a podcast: iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and on, including its own dedicated app. There are lots of ways to support CraftLit, from patreon.com/CraftLit to CraftLit.com memberships and channel memberships on YouTube. You can find out more details at CraftLit.com/premium. And as always, thank you for your support. And remember, if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can turn one on.